If your opponent is of a choleric temper, seek to irritate him. It's wonderful advice from Sun Tzu. But what if you take it a little too far and it gets you into trouble? Today, we're looking at Ragebaiters who did exactly that. And we'll start with the blue alien who was destined for, his parents never completed that sentence. Megamind defeated Metro Man. Or at least he thought he did. And then he was bored. He had everything he wanted. The city was his, and nobody could stop him. But there was one problem. Victory became boring. He needed a challenge to make his life feel worth living. Without Metro Man around, Megamind had no purpose. So he decided to create a new hero. The result was this guy, Titan. Or Titan, as he accidentally renamed himself because he was too dumb to spell. But when Megamind's plan to turn Hal into his rival failed, he had only one way of getting through to him, causing him to explode with rage. Revealing that his space dad was in fact Megamind himself was one thing, but revealing that he was kissing Roxanne Ritchie was the ultimate rage bait. Hal lost it, and the game was on. But Megamind's rage baiting didn't start with Hal. It started in his childhood, and so did his first crimes, vandalizing the school. At one point, we all thought about it, right? But Megamind actually did it in style. And while it was pretty badass, it's also a crime. Metro City is based in San Francisco, so under California laws, for vandalism, a minor like Megamind was at the time would receive mandatory community service as punishment. Megamind running count, community service. Later, Megamind escaped from prison, using the disguise watch that Minion delivered to him. He managed to fool the guards and transform himself into the warden. He simply walked out, even waving at the security guard. That's prison escape and criminal impersonation. Under California law, non-violent prison escape can carry up to 3 years in state prison. Criminal impersonation would add another 2 years. Megamind running count, community service plus 5 years in prison. Immediately after escaping, Megamind went back to crime. Minion kidnapped Roxanne on Megamind's orders and brought her to the observatory as bait for Metro Man. Roxanne wasn't harmed, but she was held against her will so Megamind could lure Metro Man into a trap. That's kidnapping, and under California law, this kind of kidnapping can carry up to 8 years in prison. Megamind running count, community service plus 5 years in prison, plus 8 years in prison. Megamind's brilliant plan to destroy Metro Man once and for all failed, but it still counts as attempted murder of Metro City's favorite hero. And Megamind celebrated what he believed was the death of his greatest enemy. And because the target was intentionally lured into a deadly trap, Megamind gets the maximum penalty. That's life in prison. Megamind running count, community service plus 5 years in prison, plus 8 years in prison, plus life in prison. After Metro Man's alleged defeat, Megamind took over the city, and it was at that moment that the crazy duo started committing a series of crimes. Megamind and Minion went on a rampage, robbing banks, destroying the city, stealing and destroying priceless art, and these charges combined would be enough for another life sentence. Megamind running count, community service plus 5 years in prison, plus 8 years in prison, plus life in prison times 2. And then came the desperation and existential crisis. Mega Man felt bad for destroying Metro Man, and everything that reminded him of Metro Man had to be destroyed. So he went on to destroy Metro Man's museum, only to bump into Roxanne. Hiding from her, Megamind used his dehydration gun to freeze Bernard, an innocent museum employee. That's assault, enough for 2 more years in prison, plus destruction of the museum, which is another 7 years in prison. Megamind running count, community service plus 5 years in prison, plus 8 years in prison, plus life in prison times 2, plus 2 years, plus 7 years. After realizing Roxanne actually enjoyed spending time with Bernard, Megamind continued the deception. He built an entire friendship with her based on this fake identity. That's criminal impersonation and fraud by deception. Under California law, impersonation can result to up to 1 year in jail. Megamind running count, community service plus 5 years in prison, plus 8 years in prison, plus life in prison times 2, plus 2 years, plus 7, plus 1 year. Then he obtained Metro Man's DNA and used it to create a new hero who could be his rival. Megamind altered Hal's DNA without consent, and Hal eventually became a threat to the entire city. That is reckless endangerment and unlawful human experimentation. And another year behind bars. Megamind final count, community service plus life in prison times 2, plus 24 years in prison. Now let's go to the kingdom of Duloc.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
That was Lord Farquaad's one ultimate f*** you to his entire kingdom. When Shrek arrived in Duloc demanding his swamp back, Farquaad first ordered everyone to kill the ogre. But after seeing how Shrek easily defeated them all, he saw an opportunity. He offered Shrek a deal to travel across the kingdom, fight a dragon, rescue a princess, and maybe then he would consider returning Shrek's swamp. But it was Farquaad who ordered the removal of fairy tale creatures from Duloc and banished them to Shrek's swamp. The three little pigs, Pinocchio, the big bad wolf, and dozens of others were removed from their homes. That's unlawful imprisonment, forced displacement, and seizure of property. Since Shrek is an early 15th century fairy tale version of England, these actions would be treated as abuse of feudal authority. A noble abusing his subjects like this would lose lands, titles, and property, assuming somebody higher up the feudal ladder cared enough to punish him, which is a very big assumption. Punishing a lord as powerful as Farquaad required you to declare war on him and actually win that war. So he can easily get away with it if he makes the war look unwinnable before it even starts. But let's just assume his liege lord or the king actually goes to war against Farquaad and wins. Well, what happens? Farquaad gets stripped of his lands and titles. Farquaad running count, confiscation of lands and titles. But his crimes are far from done. Farquaad imprisoned the fairy tale creatures. Some were placed in cages while others were transported against their will. That's false imprisonment. Medieval courts took unlawful imprisonment seriously, and this could lead to a 10-year exile. Farquaad running count, confiscation of lands and titles, plus 10-year exile. Later, he tortured the gingerbread man. In an attempt to find all the remaining fairy tale creatures' locations, he ruthlessly interrogated and broke Gingy's legs. That's torture, aggravated assault, and amputation for which a 15th century noble like Farquaad would face severe retaliation under the Lex Talionis, law of retaliation, which dictated an eye for an eye. Since Gingy suffered loss of limbs, Farquaad could face amputation of his own hands or feet, assuming that someone higher than him would make sure to put him on trial. Farquaad running count, confiscation of lands and titles, plus 10 years in exile, plus amputation. But there is more. After Fiona arrived in Duloc, Farquaad immediately prepared the wedding despite barely knowing her, and he did it just so he could become a king. He chose a random princess from his magic mirror and didn't think about her consent. While royal marriages were often arranged during this period, Fiona's wishes clearly weren't a priority, so this would likely be viewed as coercive use of noble authority, and forcing a woman into marriage was a crime that the churches dealt with. The Duloc Cathedral Church, where Fiona was supposed to marry him, could sentence Farquaad to permanent exile. Farquaad running count, confiscation of lands and titles, plus 10-year exile, plus amputation, plus permanent exile. Finally, when Fiona's curse was revealed, a disgusted Lord Farquaad ordered Fiona locked away and Shrek arrested and prepared to have him executed, despite no lawful trial taking place. That's abuse of power, but under the circumstances, this wouldn't be a crime. Farquaad final count, confiscation of lands and titles, plus 10-year exile, plus amputation, plus permanent exile. Now, let's go to medieval Spain, where death is chasing Puss in Boots, and Big Jack Horner is chasing the wishing star.
You're not gonna shoot a puppy, are you, Jack?
Yeah, in the face. Why?
Big Jack Horner had no mercy. Not for puppies, not for bears, not for the Puss in Boots. He owned a successful pie company, he was rich and famous, but he wanted more. He owned many magical artifacts, and the wishing star was what he needed. Because to guys like Jack, nothing is ever enough. Jack assembled his expedition team to locate the wishing star, and throughout the journey, he ordered attacks against Kitty, Puss, and Perrito. Jack's men attempted to kill them, and he personally tried to end them more than once. That's several counts of attempted murder. In medieval Spain, attempted murder can often carry a death sentence, and considering that Jack possessed and used numerous magical creatures and artifacts, that's also a serious crime, because sorcery in medieval Europe wasn't appreciated. So the punishment would be death by burning at the stake for using magic. Jack running count, death by burning on the stake. And for attempted murder of that cute puppy and threatening his life, Jack wouldn't be charged because in medieval Spain, the concept of animal cruelty as a legal offense did not exist as it does today. If you hurt someone's dog, you'd have to pay the owner compensation. But Perito didn't have an owner, so there's no one to pay. Jack's ultimate plan was to obtain unlimited magical power. He wanted complete control over magic itself. A man attempting to gain supernatural power beyond that of kings, nobles, and the church would be viewed as a threat to the entire ruling class, and the church and the monarch certainly wouldn't allow that. So that would be another death by fire for Jack. Jack running count, 2 times death by burning at the stake. Jack never had enough wise-ass retorts.
It's so cute how you think that would work on me. Don't you know I'm dead inside?
And that's what makes him a perfect rage baiter, because roasting people comes naturally to him. Jack Horner final count, 2 times death by burning at the stake. Now, let's go to the Old West, where Rattlesnake Jake was rage baiting Rango until it broke him.
Why don't you just pull your gun and shoot me? All you've done is lie to these good people. You ain't nothing but a fake and a coward. Isn't that right?
Rattlesnake Jake was the living embodiment of fear and dirt. Whenever the mayor needed someone threatened or eliminated, Jake was the one he called. And Jake didn't really care about money or power. He simply enjoyed being the most badass legend of the Wild West. Jake enjoyed exposing Rango as a fraud and making the whole town watch. He exposed Rango's lies, stripping away the town's hope, and mocking them for putting their faith in a liar. He threatened Rango at gunpoint in front of the entire town and forced him to abandon his position as sheriff. Under territorial law in the 1880s Mojave Desert, Rattlesnake Jake's humiliation of Sheriff Rango, driving him out of town, and murdering the previous 15 sheriffs would make him an outlaw, and because of these crimes, there would be a bounty on his head. And that's a death sentence because if he was caught alive, he would be hanged. Jake running count, death by hanging. After driving Rango out of town, Jake immediately moved on to something much worse. Together with the mayor, he captured Beans and forced her to sign away her family's ranch. Jake wrapped his body around her and began squeezing while demanding that she sign the document. That's kidnapping, torture, and extortion. Beans was being held against her will, while Jake threatened to kill her if she refused to cooperate. For this, Jake would face at least 25 years in prison with hard labor. Jake running count, death by hanging plus 25 years in prison with hard labor. When Rango returned to save the town, Jake didn't exactly calm down. During the final battle, he opened fire throughout the town, using the Gatling gun attached to his tail. But that was a legal duel, and while Jake was an outlaw, this specific confrontation was not a crime in the Old West. After the mayor betrayed him, Jake dragged him away into the desert. That counts as murder. And while nobody really cared about the corrupt mayor, murder is still murder, so that's another death by hanging for Jake. Jake final count, 20 years in prison plus hanging times 2. And finally, let's talk about one voodoo doctor who had friends on the other side. Now, this guy was a different type of rage baiter, but a complete professional in his work. He figures out what people want and then uses their desperation to trap them in a dark voodoo deal. He even had his own Ragebait style song. Dr. Facilier just needed his charismatic smile, a deck of cards, and people dumb enough to trust him. Facilier was a fraudulent fortune teller and con artist in 1920s New Orleans. He promised his people wealth and power through his so-called magic while manipulating them for his own benefit. And while fortune telling itself wasn't necessarily illegal, obtaining money through deception absolutely was. Facilier tricked Prince Naveen into signing a magical contract and transformed him into a frog. At the same time, he transformed Lawrence into a copy of Naveen so that he could steal the prince's identity and fortune. That's fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Under Louisiana law, identity theft is enough for 5 years in prison, and another 5 for conspiracy. Dr. Facilier running count, 10 years in prison. But stealing Naveen's identity wasn't the real goal. Facilier wanted control of the LaBeouf fortune. Using Lawrence as a fake prince, Facilier planned to marry Charlotte and gain access to her father's enormous wealth. That's attempted grand theft and financial fraud. Under Louisiana law, financial fraud of this scale can carry another 10 years. Dr. Facilier running count, 20 years in prison. And while all of this was happening, Prince Naveen was being held against his will. Facilier imprisoned Naveen and used him as part of his scheme. That's kidnapping. In Louisiana, kidnapping can carry up to 20 years in prison, including hard labor while inside. Dr. Facilier running count, 20 plus 20 plus hard labor. While Ray the Firefly discovered his plans and tried to help Tiana and Naveen, Facilier crushed him under his foot. That's murder. Under Louisiana law in the 1920s, murder was often punishable by death, but Ray was just a small firefly, and that wouldn't even count as animal cruelty. Dr. Facilier running count, 20 plus 20 plus hard labor. To gain control of New Orleans, Facilier planned the deaths of both Prince Naveen and Eli Big Daddy LaBeouf. Naveen was imprisoned and almost permanently removed from the picture, while Big Daddy was targeted because of his wealth and influence stood in the way of Facilier's plans. That's double attempted murder. In Louisiana during the 1920s, double attempted murder could result in 20 years of hard labor in the state penitentiary. Dr. Facilier running count, 20 years in prison, plus 40 years in prison with hard labor. Facilier's terrifying goal was even worse. He planned to use his magic to deliver the souls of countless citizens of New Orleans to his friends on the other side, in exchange for power and to pay off his debt. Thousands of innocent people would have paid the price for his ambitions. While 1920s Louisiana law obviously had no crime called mass soul condemnation, prosecutors would likely treat the scheme as a conspiracy to commit mass murder on an unprecedented scale. And for that, he would be facing at least 100,000 death sentences. Dr. Facilier running count, 20 years in prison, plus 40 years in prison with hard labor, plus death by hanging, plus 100,000. In the final battle, Facilier tried to eliminate anyone standing in the way of his scheme, but it was too late. His voodoo friends from the other side came for his soul, dragging him to the underworld, where his punishment will be eternity in the spirit world. And if somehow he managed to come back to New Orleans, it would be even worse because he would be hanged repeatedly 100,001 times, after serving 60 years in prison, of course. Dr. Facilier final count, 20 years in prison, plus 40 years in prison with hard labor, plus death by hanging, plus 100,000 years, plus eternity in the spirit realm. And that's it! Our ultimate Ragebait villain story ended badly. What did we learn? Don't play with the friends from the other side, and if you practice voodoo, make sure to honor the agreements with the spirit world. If you like this video, check out this one. If villains were charged for their crimes during crash outs.